Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the East Gippsland Shire Council's meeting of Tuesday, the 6th of August 2024. The East Gippsland Shire live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public by following the link on Council's website. During the meeting, any member of the public who is addressing the Council will have their image and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record Council meetings unless approval has been granted by the Chair. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend council meetings electronically or in person, and the meetings will be open to the public and via live streaming. If technical difficulties are experienced with the live streaming during the meeting, I will adjourn the meeting until the issue is resolved. If technical issues cannot be resolved, the meeting may be postponed to a later time or date. The East Gippsland Shire Council acknowledges the Gunai-Kurnai, Monero and Bidwell people as the traditional owners of this land that encompass East Gippsland and the East Gippsland Shire, and recognises their enduring relationships with country. The traditional owners have cared for and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders, past, present and emerging. A member's attendance can only be recorded as present at a council meeting when the member can confirm that they meet all of the following criteria. Firstly, that they can hear proceedings and be heard by other members in attendance, and secondly, that they can see other members in attendance and be seen by other members. I'll now confirm with the councillors online, in turn, or in fact just Councillor Buckley tonight, that they can see, hear and be heard by each other, and note assurance from Councillor Buckley that the location she's participating from is secure to ensure confidential deliberations remain confidential. Good evening, Councillor Buckley. Can you see and hear us?
Good evening, Mayor. Yes, I can.
And can you confirm the location you're participating from this evening is secure?
It is secure, but if my late father was here, he would probably fly under the bridge behind me.
Very good. Agenda item 1.2 is apologies, and there are no apologies to note tonight. Agenda item 1.3 is declarations of conflict of interest. Councillors and staff, do we have any declarations in matters to be considered this evening?
Yes, Mayor, I have a conflict at item 5.2.1.
Thank you. And Councillor Greason?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a conflict with item 5.1.1.
Thank you. And Councillor Reeves?
Again, thank you, Mayor. If item 2, the notice of motion, is proceeded with, I would declare a conflict there.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Agenda item 1.4 is confirmation of the minutes. Do I have a mover to confirm the minutes of the previous council meeting as tabled are accurate representation of that meeting? Thank you, Councillor Reeves. And a seconder? Councillor Greason. Councillor Reeves would like to speak to the motion. Councillor Greason? No. Is the motion opposed? No. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. The next meeting of council is scheduled to occur on Tuesday, the 27th of August 2024 here at the Corporate Centre at 27 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 6 p.m. Agenda item 1.6 is requests for leave of absence. Have we had any requests for leaves of absence, CEO?
Not for the council meeting, no, Mayor.
Thank you. Agenda item 1.7 is the open forum, and our first item at 1.7.1 is petitions. CEO, do we have any petitions this evening?
We don't have a petition, but perhaps just for the gallery, I can identify that we did have a petition that came in about a planning matter. When we have a petition that comes for a planning matter, we treat it as a submission or as a series of submissions, so that's the way that one is being treated.
Understood. Thank you, CEO. And agenda item 1.7.2 is questions of council. I understand we have several questions this evening, CEO.
We do. Thank you, Mayor. We have 6 questions in batches of 2, so 2 for each. 2 of those have asked for them to be read out, and the final set of questions, the questioner is in the gallery and will ask the questions himself.
Very good.
So if we're happy to proceed, the first 2 questions are from Leo Morrison. The first question is, did Council fly the rainbow flag to mark the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Intersex Discrimination and Transphobia on the 17th of May of this year? I will ask our Acting General Manager of Place and Community to answer the question.
Thank you, CEO, and through you, Mayor. And thank you for the question, Leah. Unlike previous years, the rainbow flag was actually not raised this year. However, Council promoted Ida Hobbit Day on our Facebook page, as we have done every year since 2019, except in the COVID year of 2020. The Voice of East Gippsland, which Council supports, has also promoted it for a number of years. And this year, Council and the Freezer program, which is a program that supports young people to organise festivals, live music events and cultural workshops for other young people in our community, and Council's youth ambassadors hosted an Ida Hobbit afternoon tea at the Bastion Library. Youth Voice also did a Facebook post promoting this event, and our corporate page liked that, which meant that it would appear in the feeds of the people who follow our Council's Facebook page. And the event was also promoted by Council ahead of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second question is also from Ms Morrison, and it was, will Council consider establishing an LGBTIQA plus advisory committee? And again, I'll ask Ms Owen to answer the question as Acting General Manager of Place and Community. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Leah. After the local election in late October this year, the new council will examine current and consider new advisory committees that can best inform how we can support our community to thrive, during which time whether a committee of this type is worthwhile would also be considered. So thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor, our next set of questions are from Kaylee Eady. They are 2 questions that follow on from each other, so I'm actually going to read them together because otherwise the first question perhaps doesn't make as much sense. So the first question is, what is deemed a timely response from Council? And the second question is, why has my email dated the 19th of June 2024 never been responded to regarding the update on Chillis Road, a petition? However, coincidentally, maintenance work started on Monday the 24th of June. What is Council's response to our 7 questions? And I will ask our Paul Rooney, who is our Acting General Manager of Assets and Environment, to respond to both questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee. There are different responses for different types of inquiries. These are all laid out in Customer Response Charter, which you can find on our website. In general, though, this is 2 business days for phone calls or in-person contact, 10 business days for written correspondence, including emails. There are exceptions to this where the response is complex or other things need to be done before we can respond, in which case we should tell you this and when we will be able to come back to you. In part to the second question, again, correspondence was sent on May 17 advising that Council's road safety team had completed inspections of the road and intersection at Chillis Road and that routine maintenance had been scheduled. A follow-up email was received that included 7 questions requesting updates provided when we have something to advise. At this stage, Council is waiting for completion of a road safety audit being undertaken on Chillis Road and the adjoining intersection, and we'll be happy to advise of that outcome once received.
Thank you. And our final set of questions are from Maurice Bourget, who is in the gallery, and I will invite him to the table to ask the questions himself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bourget. And I'll just remind you that members of the public addressing Council are reminded to extend due courtesy and respect to the Council and its staff at all times, and the processes under which Council operates. You also need to take direction from me if you're called to do so, and there will be no discussion or debate with the attendee for public questions or submissions. However, councillors may ask questions of clarification of the attendee. Thank you and welcome, Mr Borgelt. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I've noticed council has changed the format for question time, effectively reducing the number of questions by 50%, as well as no longer offering the open forum submissions. And this is all on the back of the new sheet, What has led to these sudden and dramatic changes in the exchange of information between council and its residents?
Thank you, and I'll ask our General Manager of Business Excellence to respond.
Thanks for the question. Look, there have been no changes to the format for public question time for public submissions. So they're in our governance rules, which haven't been changed since August 2022. The governance rules do state that you can have 2 questions, can be accepted from any person at any one meeting, and that obviously we continue to value open and transparent communication with members of the community. And the community participation mechanisms. I think what we did do, though, is change the form slightly to make it more simple for people to be able to submit their questions. So I am wondering whether that's been the change that you've noticed.
Is that a question?
No, that was a comment.
Okay. My question at the last question time was, what is the time limit for wait listees to accept or reject a berth offer in the Chinamans Creek Marina? I pointed out at the time the answer didn't fit the question, which had obviously been misunderstood, and I was told it would be given in writing. 3 weeks later, I still don't have it. What is it and why not?
Thank you for your second question, which I'm going to refer to Mr Rooney, our Acting General Manager of Assets and Environment. Thank you, Paul.
Yep, thanks again for the question, Morris. We replied to you writing on the 1st of August and responded to your question being, what is the time limit for wait listees to accept or reject berth? Council's response was there is a period identified in the lease agreement whereby if a vessel is not in the allocated site, it can be leased to another party. This time frame is 3 months. Prior to entering into the lease agreement, the time frame in which council allows the waitlist applicant to either decline or accept the offer of berth is not specified, given some of the time it takes for all of our risk obligations to be met. The question has prompted council to consider an appropriate time frame to ensure transparency is in process.
Thank you for your questions, Mr Borgelt. Agenda item 1.7.
Is that really an answer?
Yes, sir, I believe it was, and I think it was also supplied to you in writing. Agenda item 1.7.3 is public submissions.
We have one public submission, and as is our process, that will be heard at the item, so that's for item 5.1.1.
Oh, yes, very good. Agenda item 1.8 is items for tabling. Do we have any items for tabling? Don't believe there are any, which moves us to agenda item number 2, which is notices of motion. Councillor Buckley?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just bear with me for one moment. I've just got to bring up some information here. So under consideration and thank you, Mayor, and through you, I would like to formally withdraw my notice of motion for consideration at this meeting. However, I would like to foreshadow my intention to resubmit this motion or a variation of it at a future meeting of council. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and we look forward to that motion. Agenda item number 3 is deferred business.
We have no deferred business.
Very good. And agenda item 4 is councillor and delegate reports. And councillors, you will recall that we have agreed previously to submit our reports in written form to be included in the minutes of this meeting. So I encourage you to do that. Which moves us to now agenda item number 5.1.1, in place and community. It's planning permit application 2023 451.1, which is a 2-lot subdivision building and works for a second dwelling at 34 to 36 8th Avenue Raymond Island. And welcome to the chamber, Kate Young. I understand you are making a submission on this item. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I don't intend to repeat myself. I know council meeting nights go long enough, so I'll keep it succinct. Since our last meeting, what I've done is a little bit further research for you. I hope that you're all familiar with this, the SES Local Flood Guide for Raymond Island. Okay, this tells you that residents on Raymond Island have many days of warning ahead of a flood event. And I've highlighted a salient point. So we all walk around with our phones with our Vic Emergency app in them, and you know that we all looked at religiously during those horrible bushfires, and now they ping us every time rain comes to tell us there's potentially a flood warning. So it talks about the difference between a flood watch and a flood warning issued by the Bureau of Meteorology. So a flood watch means there's a developing weather pattern that might cause floods, okay? East coast low, rain up high in the catchment. You're all locals, you know what I'm talking about. But a flood warning means flooding is about to happen or is already happening. And what this document says is, for the Gippsland lakes, flood warnings are generally issued after many days of flooding in communities such as Traralgon, Sale, Stratford and Bairnsdale, and well before flooding begins in the communities around the Gippsland lakes. A flood warning provides predictions of flood impacts and the estimated time before the lake will reach particular levels at various gauges and how long it will take for that water to recede. Okay, so you've got many days of warning. If they get many days of warning in Sale or Stratford before a flood comes, and we've got many days after that. So I just encourage you to keep that in mind when you consider that. I also suggested at the last meeting that the officer recommendation is guided by an absence of policy, and that's simply not the case. You have this current policy, the council coastal inundation and erosion planning policy. This hasn't been rescinded. Yes, it hasn't been updated, but there's many things on council's policy books that haven't been updated in a timely manner. No judgment, just a statement. So the recommendation that's before you is suggesting that local policy has no relevance and that you should be looking to state policy, which looks at flooding through a single lens, okay? And we all know on the Gippsland Lakes there's a huge difference between a bathtub effect of gradual inundation versus a roaring torrent of floodwaters down from like you'd see in a riverine flood event. So it's a very different experience. So I would implore you as locally elected officials that it's your role to consider and uphold local policy. No one else can do that but you. And I believe the failure of this recommendation at the previous council meeting reflects that you all take this role very seriously. And this policy should provide you with guidance and comfort. There's a statement at page 5 of the policy that I'd like to read for you. And it says, all applications for development and use will be assessed on their merits, having regard for all relevant planning matters. Okay, so I'll remind you that the referral responses here said that nobody else had an issue with this. It ticks the box for fire, it ticks the box for services, it ticks the box for clause 56, it even ticks the box for inundation. This site will not get wet in a flood event. What it is a single issue of egress. I'd ask you to consider how an egress limitation might affect your property. And remember, the question I posed last time was, where are we egressing to? Is it to the town centre here of Bairnsdale? Because if we applied that same limitation to the councillor group, the only person who could be here in the room with me is Councillor Stowe. Each of the rest of you would be impacted by a 1 in 100 year flood event that would prevent you accessing Bairnsdale. Okay? You know, if it was, Councillor Greason's not here, but she wouldn't get out of her driveway in a 1 in 100 year flood event, okay? So you need to really seriously think about the implications of imposing this. If your house burns down, what does that mean? Okay, if we're going to impose this limitation so stringently, so I'd implore you to consider the risk here. This site is not a greenfield site, it's not a remote site. It's surrounded by properties on all sides. It's been allocated with 2 street numbers that indicates that even council believes this has infill potential. So the risk in this recommendation has been grossly overstated. We know when a flood is coming and we make the choice to go now or to stay. I'd implore you to understand that the implications of this decision and the message that you're sending to potential investors in East Gippsland. You're effectively saying no to development in any of our coastal settlements. The last person out of Lakes, out of Marlow, out of Malakuta, out of Eagle Point should turn the lights off when they leave. And I submit to you that this is simply an unacceptable outcome, and I'd encourage you to abide by your policy and to consider this on its merits. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Young. This sits within the Directorate of Place and Community, so we'll go to Alba.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Councillors, before you is a report seeking to issue a notice of refusal to grant a planning permit for a 2-lot subdivision and buildings and works for a second dwelling at 34 to 36 8th Avenue, Raymond Island. In accordance with the planning delegations policy, the application is reported to Council for matters of policy consideration. This matter was considered by Council on the 16th of July this year at its meeting at item 5.1.1. The motion was lost, meaning that no determination of the application was made. The report is therefore re-presented and the officer recommendation is remade, unchanged, to provide Council the opportunity to make a determination. Council should consider the matter afresh, including balancing competing policy considerations, the referral advice and the options outlined in the report. As such, I will outline some key points. The application has been made subject to notice and no public objections were received. It was referred to the CFA, who support it, and the East Gippsland Catchment Management Authority, EGCMA, who object to the grant of a permit. The objection from EGCMA relates to the egress from the site in a 1 in 100 year flood event exceeding 0.8 floodwater depth over the surface of roads, which is the maximum acceptable tolerance. The assessment of the proposal is that it complies with all objectives in the general residential zone, bushfire management overlay, design and development overlay 11, and clause 56 residential subdivision of the planning scheme. In relation to the land subject to inundation overlay and the planning policy framework, it is assessed that the proposal does not meet the policy objectives and therefore should not be supported. The report details the history of previous considerations given to the issue of infill subdivision in coastal settlements, including Raymond Island. In recognition of the clear policy guidelines set by state government and the recommendations from EGCMA, this recommendation is based on the best available evidence and the need for Council to respond accordingly. Therefore, the officer's recommendation is to issue a notice of refusal to grant the planning permit, subject to the grounds outlined in the recommendation. With me tonight is Martin Richardson, Manager Planning and Development, to answer any technical questions. The report is presented for consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Elling. Councillors, do we have any questions of officers? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wish to foreshadow an alternative or an alternate motion in relation to this matter.
Okay. Do you have any questions for officers?
Just one, and that is that has there been, I guess, precedents when we have, you know, one small matter from a regulatory body where a planning permit basically ticks all the boxes bar one small egress, which is this is under consideration matter. Is this the standard sort of practice that would take place in determination of this kind of thing? Because it seems to me to be setting a dangerous precedent.
I'll refer that question to Mr Richardson.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Mayor. Yes, it is correct that there have been instances, and I think in the background in the report it refers to the fact that in the past we have had similar objections from the Catchment Management Authority to infill development on Raymond Island, and in many, if not all of those cases in recent history, we've actually made a recommendation or issued a permit contrary to that advice. So, and I think the report then, you know, it goes on to say that, you know, there is a shifting shifting policy environment. There is strengthening of policy in relation to development within areas of environmental risk, etc. And that's, I guess, has got the planning officers thinking more about, well, changes in policy at a state level have strengthened the importance of managing inundation risk. But it is entirely correct to say that there have been probably many cases in the past where we have taken a view different to that of a referral authority. And I will point out to Council that you're not bound by the advice of this referral authority. It's the difference between a recommending authority and a determining authority where we have to follow their advice. In this case, the Council simply must have regard to that advice, but is not bound to follow it.
Right, so based on the previous history of Raymond Island, we've moved forward with it regardless of that objection, and it's only just now that we're suddenly trying to, assume a different position because of the advice given. So thank you for that history lesson, Martin. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, are there any other questions of officers? John, please go ahead.
Thank you. In listening to Kate's description of this application, well done on what you said. Now, my question now is, if this follows your recommendation, is that the end of any other development of a house on Raymond Island?
Thanks, Councillor White. Through you, Mayor. Not necessarily, and I know it's sometimes difficult to comprehend, but we always make this statement that each application must be considered on its merits. So a decision by Council in relation to one application does not bind the Council to make the same decision for any subsequent application. If a subsequent application is lodged and almost exactly the same circumstances apply, then Council would be wise to be consistent in its decision making. But I will certainly acknowledge in this case that the consequences or the implications of a decision to refuse this application are fairly far-reaching for infill development on Raymond Island. If, however, we were to receive, and there are some parcels of land on Raymond Island that are potentially available for subdivision into 8 or 10 lots, we would probably take a strong view on that because it's not necessarily regarded as infill. But I would also concede that that one of the difficult implications of a decision to refuse this application is that it would be a signal that the Council would be likely to refuse applications that are lodged in similar circumstances. And that's also something I'm happy to say that I'm uncomfortable with, because there is very little potential for future development of any scale on Raymond Island. So we're only talking about possibly, I think we said there's something like the ability for another 30 houses on Raymond Island, and some of those would be constrained by bushfire limitations, etc. So the implications for Raymond Island are that it would send a signal that people who own a small parcel and wanted to develop a dwelling may certainly get a clear signal that that wouldn't be supported, and that's an uncomfortable situation for Council to be in, and we acknowledge that.
Okay, thanks, Martin. But I'm viewing this in an overall position for Raymond Island, and in fact, it's all about access to and from the island during a flood event or prior to. So you're actually, is this putting the entire population of Raymond Island, those who already live there, at risk?
No, Councillor White, if I get the intent of your question, a decision on this application doesn't change the fact that everyone else on Raymond Island would have trouble getting off the island in a flood, and this doesn't change that. And again, that's a consideration is, what's the kind of incremental implications of this? 1, 2 or 3 more houses isn't going to change the fact that 550 people are going to have to deal with a flood. This doesn't change that fact.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillors, any further questions of officers on this matter? No? Councillor Reeves.
Look, thanks, Mayor. I heard on the radio Council Watch actually strongly advocating for a statewide flooding review and overlay, which is encouraging from Council Watch actually, because we as a council have been advocating for the state government to take a view on a statewide approach to developing a flood overlay, like bushfire management overlays. If that were to happen, what might be the implications for Raymond Island and our decision-making in future?
Thanks, Councillor. Good question. And through you, Mayor, we certainly have been advocating for that, and I will mention as an aside that I've been having discussions with my colleagues in other Gippsland councils who are struggling with this as well, and we hold one position, and that is that council by council we shouldn't be dealing with this on our own, because the implications for the community go right across regional Victoria. And similar to the bushfire management overlay, that was led by the state government. So the implications of a review of the risks associated with inundation, and we're likely to see recommendations on that following the recent, I think it was a parliamentary inquiry on the floods in the north. We're likely to see some action coming out of that from the government about a statewide approach to flooding. The difference is that there are different circumstances. So the floods that were experienced in northern Victoria were rapid flash floods, houses washed away. That doesn't happen around the Gippsland Lakes. And so ideally, the implications of a statewide approach is that the management of planning matters around flooding would be customised to deal with the different circumstances that apply to different kinds of flooding. And the great benefit of a statewide approach and the implications for that would be that there would be a consistent messaging from a policy point of view to the whole of regional Victoria, not council by council. And that's one of the challenges that we do face, is that it's a very difficult proposition for the council to be discussing with the community potential significant changes to the land subject to inundation overlay because of the significant implications that has for insurance and for the potential for people to build in, not just in Raymond Island, but Paynesville, Meetung, Lakes Entrance, Bem River, etc. So that's why we're advocating for a statewide approach, because we are seeing some real inconsistency from council to council in how these matters are being dealt with. And again, with the discussions I've had with my colleagues, many of the other councils in Gippsland are also struggling with, with the greatest of respect to the CMA, they're struggling with some of the advice that they're getting and are saying we really need some consistency around this. And until we get that statewide consistency, it's going to be difficult to make these decisions.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillors, are there further questions? Councillor Buckley, is that a question? No? Any further questions, councillors? There is an officer recommendation in the report. Councillor Buckley?
Yes, I'd like to move an alternate motion. If possible, could that be displayed?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, would you like me to read that out, Mayor?
Yes, you can, certainly.
The council being the responsible authority and having considered
Sorry, Councillor Buckley. Sorry, Councillor Buckley. I'll just ask you to start again. There was a break in our uplink there.
Yeah, sorry, the connectivity is a bit rough tonight. I do apologise. That council being the responsible authority and having considered all the relevant planning matters determines that planning permit application 5.2023.454.1 is consistent with the requirements and objectives of the East Gippsland Planning Scheme and therefore resolves to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit for a two-lot subdivision and development of a second dwelling subject to the following permit conditions. Do I need to read all the permit conditions, Mayor?
No, I don't think so. I think they're there for everybody to see. Thank you, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mayor.
Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Stowe. Thank you. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion? Yes, look, I think that Kate's position on this matter just solidifies the importance of ensuring that we send the right message to every ratepayer in East Gippsland that we
we respect their as of rights on their land parcels, that our doors are open, we are open for business, that we are responsible in considering the relevant planning matters, and that we will support them during that process. And I think that this will set, we've already had one decision on this. We're coming back for a second one. And I think that that shows that councillors are really dedicated to ensure that they're making the right decisions, and to support this ask, we just have to look at the history of Raymond Island. We have in the past always had some, concern from the regulatory body about egress, etc., and flooding. However, we've still gone ahead and given those applications because it's the right thing to do. It's the as of rights of that person. As a councillor, to set a precedent where we have Raymond Islanders who have small parcels of land which will become, after this big decision, and this is a big decision, councillors, right? This is people's livelihoods and their asset bases, that they'll have a block of land that won't be worth as much it was after this council decision because no one can see that they're going to be able to get permits through. So I really ask councillors to take this decision as a very important one, and do the right thing by the ratepayers of East Gippsland. Do the right thing for the Raymond Island people. Set the right precedent. It's only a guide, what has been given to us, a point of view. And I think it's been proven that that point of view is not sufficient for us to object to having this planning permit application go through. So I really hope you'll support this applicant and support the people of Raymond Island. We are here as their representatives. We are representatives of the people. And today, that's your job. Represent the people of Raymond Island and show that we are open for business in our planning department. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. Look, Councillor Sonia is quite right in what she says. There's no reason to knock this back. These are just mum and dad investors that are they're putting their money forward, and they should have every right to build this property. Put yourself in their position if it was your block of land. They're not doing any damage to the environment. There's no safety issues. We've all conceded that. There is no reason to knock this back. It complies with all requirements, basically. The island's almost fully developed. It's not as if we're going to be opening up the island to another 50 or 100 houses in the future. This is almost a one-off, and it is an infill. So, as I say, there is no reason to knock this back. Please think of these people and do the right thing and approve it.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yep, sure. Thank you. Councillors, once again, it creates a real internal tension for me. There's no doubt about it, and this decision really hangs on a knife edge. And I appreciate the conversations that have been had and the overtures that have been made. Look, I believe that I can't ignore the Catchment Management Authority's advice. As per my question, I think if we had a statewide flooding or land subject to inundation overlay across this whole area and consistent advice, we'd be in a position where we wouldn't be debating this particular matter. I agree that there's an as of right for a development, but there's also an as of responsibility for the developer to develop responsibly. And the notion has been made about the cumulative effect of developing in this particular location. At our last meeting, we moved and approved the Paynesville Growth Strategy Structure Plan, and that's where, as a council, we all furiously agree, that the development of this part of our Shire is best placed to go. And that's what we should be doing, following strategy, planning, order, organisation. And this sort of ad hoc approach, I think, is what's going to cause us to become unstuck in the future. So Look, I really agonised over this in both of these matters, but I still have to sort of refer back to the Catchment Management Authority's objection and note that it has been consistent in the past, and it's now time for us to take that advice seriously.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Allen, please go ahead.
Thank you, Tom. I want to speak for the motion. If you refer to attachment 5.1.1.1 as part of the application documents, there's a whole spreadsheet there of I don't know how many objectives everyone is complied with. So, you know, it becomes a matter of, is my objection bigger than your objection? When there's 20 or more complies with one from who is just a referral authority who says, no, it doesn't comply, then on the balance, I can't see how we can support the catchment management's position on this. And I do seriously believe that to refuse this or to go against this motion and to refuse this application is going to seriously devalue the property of everyone on Raymond Island. There's no ifs, no buts. I've seen what happened in lakes from about 2009 or 10, whenever it was, again at the behest of the Catchment Management Authority, where all development just stopped. And it's only in the last few years that it's picked up again. But that just stymied everything happening in Lakes Entrance. Thankfully, with streetscape and other things that we've done, it's bringing a bit of life back to it. But I think if we refuse this application tonight, we condemn Raymond Island and everyone that owns property on there, full stop. That they will be the big losers.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillors, anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I will vote against the motion that is on the table, but I'd also like to flag an alternative motion should this motion fail.
Certainly.
Thank you. So just to speak briefly against the current motion, again, as Councillor Reeves has expressed, I have found this a very difficult decision to make. I think we are dealing with competing policies, but on balance, I find that I need to vote to not support the development in this case and to listen to the CMA's objection. I think what I'm relying on is the need to be responsible as a council. I think we can not ignore that objection from the CMA. I hear very clearly the need for infill development. We need places to build houses, but I think there is a clear responsibility of council to direct that development to places where there is no particular risk to property or to people. And in this case, I think the risk, as we know, is not to the property itself, but is in terms of increasing the risk to people in the event of a flood and the need to evacuate people from Raymond Island. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I will put the motion to the vote. Right of reply. Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Buckley, you do have a right of reply. Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. Look, it's extremely disappointing to hear that there are councillors in the chambers who feel the way that before you. I think it sends a clear message that people's wealth, their ability to provide housing, which is in a great shortage, and that to me in itself seems counter to what I've heard councillors say around these very chambers, which is we must ensure that we are going to develop housing and we've got a shortage and we really have to work hard at this. And yet with a tiny 1% AEP flood level for a property that in a 100-year event, you're going to make a huge decision that are going to affect some people's lives and their wealth and the value of their properties. I implore those councillors to think again and change their position. I think it's your duty bound to understand that we're the decision makers here. This is just a recommendation on a 1 in 100 event, a 1% chance of an egress that the whole of Raymond Island is already subjected to. I think it's, to me, I support Councillor Stowe and Alan's positions on this. We have a duty of care to our ratepayer base, and I think it would, to vote against this would negate that duty of care. And I think I accept what in the negative what you've said, but I really think it's missed the mark. So, councillors, people are watching. We're coming up into an election phase, and I think if you're keen on standing again, then you have to prove to
Councillor Buckley, I'd just caution you to stick to the
that we
subject
are
matter if you wouldn't mind.
doing the right thing in the planning department of this organisation. We need to be seen as pro-planning, and we are responsible. I mean, we've put through plenty of planning permits in this exact position in Raymond Island in the years past. To suddenly just change on a dime seems inconsistent. And so I don't believe we should be inconsistent. I think that we should be seen as a council group or as an organisation that knows what they're doing and does it well. So, councillors, you're about to make a big decision and people are watching. So I implore you to support this amendment. Thank you. And sorry, this, I didn't mean amendment, but this, to consider this as the alternate motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, I will put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? And all those opposed? And I believe that is tied, CEO, which I believe gives me the cast.
That is correct, as may have the casting vote.
And I will vote against this motion. Thank you, councillors. Councillor White, you have a question?
Could we please have a division? Sorry?
Yeah, we now record how each and every councillor votes on each and every motion.
Okay, thank you.
So that information will be recorded in the minutes, Councillor White.
Just making sure.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Uri, I believe you foreshadowed a different motion to be put forward.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I would like to put forward the officer recommendation in the report.
Certainly. And is that seconded?
I'll second.
Councillor Reeves, thank you. No, it's the officer recommendation as was presented in the officer report. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only briefly, thank you, Mayor. I think it's quite obvious that this is a difficult decision for a lot of us, but and most of the comments have been made already. I have a different view to Councillor Buckley. I think that this is not a personal matter, and while if this application is not approved as per the officer recommendation, it likely will have impacts for the people who own the property. I'm sure it will, but the decision I think that we need to take is one of policy and responsibility that goes beyond the personal. So I think I've mentioned everything else. I think I don't need to say any more at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, just briefly, again, I think that planning is all about order and consistency and seeking and taking advice and acting on that advice, the best possible advice. And that's what I think we're doing here. And that's why I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillors, are the motion opposed? Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I'm going to oppose the motion. I can't believe that the statement that we need to have consistency was just made, because this is completely inconsistent with what has gone before us. And how disappointing. I really feel sorry for the applicants, and I am disappointed with this one. I'm disappointed in the councillors that can't see that they're actually affecting and
point of order, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Reeves. Sorry, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Reeves, what's your point?
I don't think the councillor needs to make comments about individual councillors, but talk to the motion that's at hand.
Yes, agreed. Thanks, Councillor Buckley. If you could restrain your comments to the subject matter rather than councillors' particular views.
The motion before us is personal. It does affect people's lives. It has just affected the value of every Raymond Islander, and so I am very, very personally and deeply affected by that. So I will not be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Van Diggle, please go ahead.
I've been a councillor for 3.5 years, and this has been the most difficult decision for me, because generally I would have not supported the officer's recommendation. But I have looked back at the presentation from Maddox last year that we got about our need to play an important role in making long-term decisions. We can be held liable personally and as a council. And in the past, you know, the one in Bruthen, for example, where the CFA had said not to approve, and yet I went against the CFA recommendation, I've basically decided I don't want to do that anymore. I'm not the professional when it comes to this data, and I'm just going to trust that the CMA is making the best recommendation. Yeah, I have a lot of speaking points. I'm really uncomfortable with this decision, but I just don't feel comfortable making decisions that might have, you know, negative long-term impacts on, say, my future daughter or something like that, who might want to live on the island or in this area. So I just don't want to go against the referral agency.
Thank you, Councillor Van Diggle. Councillors, anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, I may make some short points. The Catchment Management Authority is the floodplain manager. They're also the subject matter experts when it comes to flood risk. Flood events and the duration of the events, historically, you know, we've seen them come and go, and people of Raymond Island have learned to live with them. But those flood events are getting worse. The flood events are only going in one direction. All the science supports that. The risk is increasing. And as councillors, we are charged with managing risk on behalf of the community. We've heard tonight that it's only a 1 in 100 year flood event that's predicted to occur. And I'm not sure whether councillors know, but the CSIRO suggests that in the Gippsland Lakes by 2070, those 1 in 100 year events will be happening every 31 days. So it's not a 1% chance. It's an increasing risk, and if approved, it would put more people in harm's way. And this notion that we're not open for business, that is truly, and honestly, I find it hard to believe that someone would say that. We're in the process of approving the...
Point of order, Mayor. I'm sorry, you're making this personal. I'd like you to retract the statement. What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
I'm not directing those comments at anybody in particular, Councillor Buckley.
No, you just mentioned my name.
I don't think I did, so I'll just...
But I find it hard to say that Sonia would say something like that. I heard you say that, so I'd like you to retract that comment, please, as a point of order.
CEO, happy to take advice.
I believe I heard that the Mayor say that someone would put this forward. However, I'd suggest that we we come back to looking at the motion and the issue at hand.
Sure. So I'll just continue that with several thousand houses planned or thereabouts for Paynesville.
Point of order, Mayor.
Councillor Reeves.
I think there's a procedural motion on the table, Mayor.
Sorry, my mistake. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I move that we put this to a vote.
Moving that the motion be put, seconded by Councillor Stowe. Councillors, there's a motion on the table now that the motion be put. All those in favour? To put the motion? Did the motion be put? And I believe that is largely supported. Councillor Uri, you and those against? Councillor Uri, let the minutes reflect the voting. So I believe the motion will now be put. All those in favour? And those against? And I believe that is a tied vote again, so I get the cast and I will support the motion to refuse the application. Thank you, councillors. We will now move on to agenda item 5.1.2, which is Council's fair access policy. And Ms Elling, I believe this sits within your directorate. Please go ahead.
It does, and councillors, you'll be pleased to know it's a very different topic. Before you is a report seeking adoption of the draft new fair access policy. This policy is required by all Victorian councils to have to comply with the fair access obligations that are set out by the Victorian Government, led by the Officer of Women in Sport and Recreation. Therefore, the draft policy has been prepared for our council, and it also aligns with the...
Sorry, could I just ask that you pause there while we get Councillor Greason
We've
back
got
in the room?
a wayward
we seem to have
Deputy Mayor.
Forgotten her
I shall
temporarily.
pause.
It goes to show she certainly wasn't paying attention to the proceedings, as would be expected. It has. Thank you, Ms Johnson, and welcome back, Councillor Greason. We are at item 5.1.2, which is the fair access policy. Please continue, Alba. Thank you.
Okay. Won't start again? No?
Yes, please do.
Start again. Okay. Councillors, before you is a report seeking adoption of the draft new fair access policy. All Victorian councils are required to have this policy in place to comply with the fair access obligations set out by the Victorian Government, led by the Officer of Women in Sport and Recreation. Therefore, we've prepared this report for council, which also aligns with the Gender Equity Act and the wider Victorian Government Gender Equality Strategy. The policy seeks to address known barriers experienced by women and girls in accessing and using sports infrastructure. It outlines that Council acknowledges the disadvantaged position of some individuals have in the sport and active recreation sectors because of their gender, and that achieving equality will require diverse approaches to achieve similar outcomes for people of all genders in the community. It supports the state government's fair access principles of inclusivity, full participation, equal representation, encouraging and supporting and prioritising user groups that are committed to gender equity. To inform the creation of the policy, engagement occurred in line with Council's community engagement policy, including a survey and discussions with relevant committees of management. We also engaged with the Office of Women in Sport and Recreation, who reviewed the draft and have provided support for the policy. The report is presented for consideration, councillors. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Elling. Councillors, are there any questions of officers? Councillor Reeves?
I will ask a question.
Thank
I'm
you.
just interested in the intersection of a policy like this and the likes, Ms Elling, of our asset plan, for example, for sporting facilities and how these support or intersect or overlap each other.
The principles, thank you, Councillor Reeves, and through you, Mayor, the principles of this can be woven into any updates of those documents. The next stage, if this policy is adopted this evening, will be the formation of an action plan, during which we will be engaging with our committees of management. Most of the actions flowing from this will be done in concert with those committees of management and how they engage with, set their own policies for how they do their sporting activities with the community. Hope that addressed your question, Councillor Reeves.
Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Uri, please go ahead.
Thank you. Albert, I think this is a very sound policy. I understand that it's a required policy to have. Could you speak a little bit to how much you expect a policy like this, how much effect it will have both on the infrastructure that's provided, say by a sporting facility, and secondly, the culture of the facility itself?
Thank you, Councillor Uri, and through you, Mayor. Interesting question. We've been having some discussions with representatives from the Office of Women in Sport and Recreation and other stakeholders. The effect that other councils who've had policies that are similar to this in place earlier than the most recent requirement have noted that it can take up to 5 years to see a significant effect across their shires in a positive way. To answer your question about infrastructure and more broadly, I'm hoping that this policy and the action plan will inform the way council itself and those other sporting groups who perhaps own and run their own facilities will plan their infrastructure if there's changes to them, like we've seen most recently in Bairnsdale.
Are there any further questions of officers, Councillor, about this matter? Councillor Greason, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, it's terrific to see this, and I think it's a comprehensive and constructive policy. I'm just wondering, how far away are we from achieving all of this? I suspect in terms of equity within the organisation, in terms of positions and salaries and all of that, I think my understanding was that this council's doing reasonably well in terms of sporting facilities and women having access to the same level of facilities as men or boys and girls. How far away are we from achieving all of that across the Shire?
From a sporting perspective, I might need to take the question on notice because the depth of research I have available to me at this moment won't give you a rounded response. However, I do know that we have been making some inroads, particularly in the Bairnsdale Oval and the facilities there that we've seen most recently. And it's certainly something that Council is taking into consideration with the design for other facilities that we're working on the community with. But the extent to which it's filtering through, I don't have a rounded response for you this evening.
If I may,
Thank you.
to add to that, through you, Mayor, Council will recall adopting the Bairnsdale Sporting Facilities Plan and then the Gippsland Sporting Facilities Plan. And that really looked at those areas where our facilities needed to be upgraded to meet equity of access and provide fair access and encourage girls to play sports. So it was fair to say we're a fair way behind. We had quite a number of those facilities that needed to be upgraded. We're now going through the process as part of our asset management planning and our planning around facilities of prioritising those. and we've been very successful in getting grant funding for some of those recently. We will continue to work with the state government on trying to attract funding as we design and deliver and upgrade facilities. So if we overlay this with our sporting facilities plans, that gives us the complete picture. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very pleasing.
Thank you, Councillor Greason. Any further questions of officers, councillors? There is an officer recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Allen. A seconder, Councillor Greason. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, I won't talk much, just to say that I think that, you know, up until recently, our facilities for girls across the Shire have been substandard. When I think about it, you know, the thing that springs to mind is the Lindenow facilities, which are totally inadequate, and I hope that, you know, one day before very long, we're witnessing new ones opening. And I would just point out that when the gold medal tally was at 9, 7 of them belonged to women. So, you know, imagine where we could be next Olympics if we get this up and moving.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Greason.
No, I don't want to add to that. Thank you.
Councillors, is the motion opposed? No? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? I see no one, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And I believe that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Agenda item 5.1.3 is Agricultural Sector Advisory Committee Council briefing of for the unconfirmed minutes of the meeting held 9th of May 2024, and I believe, Alba, this also rests with you.
That's right, it does. Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Yes, as you mentioned, the report before you requests that Council notes the unconfirmed minutes and considers the recommendations from the Agriculture Sector Advisory Committee, or ASAC, meeting held on that day you mentioned, Thursday 9 May 2024. The 3 recommendations from the committee are that ASAC form a subcommittee to provide advice to Council on the development of a problem/opportunity statement to support the Mitchell River Water Management Arrangements Review. Secondly, that Council writes to the State Government seeking clarification of wild dog management. And thirdly, that Council close the loop in providing feedback to ASAC on the annual budget considerations tabled at its meeting most recently in May. It's worth noting that the next meeting of this committee is this Thursday, the 8th of August, during which recommendation 3 will be discussed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Elling. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to this matter? Councillor Buckley, please go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Alba. So the item 2.2, wild dog management, there's been a letter circulated around the councillor group. Would you just be able to explain how that process will work and where the process is at?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Mayor. Yes, as you mentioned, a draft letter has been crafted and provided to the councillors for consideration, and we intend to take that to the ASAC meeting on Thursday for discussion with the committee that actually recommended the letter be written in the first place. And seek their views with the view once the chair of that committee and the CEO are confident with the contents for it to be submitted. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, are there any further questions? If not, there is an officer recommendation in the report. Councillor Buckley, thank you for moving, and a seconder. Councillor White, just beat you to it. Sorry, Mark. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, certainly. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor White's position in this committee and how he has been. He's done a great job chairing this committee and the work that
Sorry,
is
Councillor Buckley, I actually chair the committee, but Councillor White is a council representative on the committee. That is true.
Stand corrected. And the work that is being done is obvious with this report. The agricultural sector is such an important part of our region and our economy. I think the better our communication and response to the information provided will only benefit all East Gippslanders. So I'm happy to recommend this motion for councillors to support. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor White, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. It's just that, yeah, we really do value this committee because they are at the grassroots of the agriculture sector in our vast region, and the members are from various different agricultural pursuits, which is a really good balance because not everybody runs cows or not everybody has sheep, but there's vineyards and there's vegetable gardens, all sorts of things. And so it's the fact that the knowledge that they can bring to this committee, as attested by the asks from the last meeting in these minutes, which will come up again on Thursday with results, and that I'm sure will make them feel that their input is beneficial to the council and how they regard the agriculture sector. So I just endorse this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And I believe that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Agenda item 5.1.2 is contract 2024-1611 Bastion Point Groyne Wall Remediation Works construction. And I believe this sits within the Assets and Environment Directorate and with Mr Paul Rooney. Welcome, Paul, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report recommending acceptance of tender awarding the contract in relation to Bastion Point Groyne Wall Remediation Works located in Malakuta. The construction of the Bastion Point boat ramp was completed in 2015, and since its completion, the boat ramp has served both the local and recreational boaters and the local abalone industry on an ongoing basis, supporting the local economy and making a safer boating experience. The boat ramp has been subject to some significant weather events where large waves have frequently breached the outer breakwater wall, prompting us to seek expert advice on the maintenance and repairs of this structure. In February 2023, we engaged Magrin and Associates Proprietary Limited, a coastal marine and engineering firm, to conduct a comprehensive site inspection, and as a result made some recommendations around required remediation works. Key points of the report for council considered are: Magrin Associates Proprietary Limited finalised a comprehensive design following the investigative work. Furthermore, to ensure the design's integrity, council enlisted Water Technology to conduct a secondary peer review as an additional precaution. The primary scope of works includes adding a new layer of larger rock armour to the wall to improve its stability and better resist wave impact. The overall design and function of the boat ramp is not impacted by this contract, which is basically for major maintenance and repairs. Better Boating Victoria 2023 recreational boating structural maintenance program has supported this project with a grant of $167,000. The remainder of the funding is from council's own budget. Ideally, the remediation works outlined in this contract will be undertaken in time for the ramp's heavy use over summer. The report has two confidential attachments that analyse the tenders, and should councillors wish to discuss these in detail, we would need to move the item into a confidential part of the meeting, given the commercial in confidence nature of the attachments. I draw your attention to the recommendations made in Attachment 2, which councillors are being asked to consider this evening. Also present tonight is Renee Wicks, Manager Infrastructure, and Johan van Rensburg, Project Engineer, who's available to respond to questions of a technical nature. This report is presented to you for consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Rooney. Councillors, are there any questions of a technical nature or otherwise? Councillor Uri, please go ahead.
Thank you. It's probably not technical. It's regarding the community. So we're looking at this contract tonight and hopefully we'll make a decision about it. I'm wondering where the community is with its understanding of what council is doing in terms of remediation.
I'm happy to answer that question. So
Thank
there
you.
has been significant consultation with the community. My Say page has been up for quite some time, and there's been plenty of feedback amongst it, but generally positive. Considering we do day-to-day maintenance down there, we have a close connection with the abalone industry as well as a lot of the users of the boat ramp, and they're fully aware of where we are and most supportive of that.
Okay. If I could just add to that, through
Please
you,
do.
Mayor, recognising that this is an important piece of infrastructure, and there are a variety of views, and there have been a variety of views in that community. We didn't want to just log down and say, oh, we've let a contract. So we've been, as Paul said, we've been through using your say, the inform component of this, because this is really major maintenance. We're not changing the shape, we're not changing the design of the boat ramp. It's really major maintenance to reinforce what's already there. So as well as using your say, we've had a lot of one-on-one conversations with key stakeholders and have been keeping them up to date. And as you'll see in the report, our intention is to continue that level of information to the community all the way through this process. We understand that, you know, for some it triggers a response, and, you know, there's some concern around this, and we want to be really mindful of that and tread very carefully and make sure that the community feels well informed about what we're doing. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. And Councillor White, I see you there, but Councillor Buckley, you were next. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So this remediation works. It's a temporary measure to what is going to be a long-term issue. Can you explain to me what, and for any ratepayer that's watching, what that means?
I might direct that question to Johan to answer.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Mayor. Essentially, what this civil package will allow, it'll allow council 3 to 5 years, essentially, it'll allow council to essentially further investigate the overall condition of the existing Groyne wall and further consult with expert coastal engineers as to any further work that we can do to further increase the longevity of the Groyne wall. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So also I have another question in regards to the rock that will be needed to be taken to this location. Can you please explain to me how the sourcing or the procurement process works and why it will be done in that specific way?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. The rock was a specific grade of rock that's been requested, so it's not going to be available at every quarry. So given the dynamics and the size and the hardness of the rock, it was that had to be procured from a certain quarry that was the only one available to supply that. It was my understanding.
This location.
Sorry, Councillor, you broke up there.
The location that is being sourced is from a fair distance away. So I suppose I just want transparency around the reasons as to why we'll be carting rock from one side of the region to the other.
Sorry, just a point of order, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Reeves, what's your point?
I want to make sure that as councillors we're not venturing into the confidential section of this report.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Reeves. I'll just seek advice on that, CEO. Is that information of a confidential nature or something that can be discussed in the open forum?
I believe we can discuss the specifics of why we need a certain type of rock, where it's coming from. I don't think, I think that's venturing into the confidential. So I think that Paul has explained that we need a certain type of rock that's specified for its hardness and its size, and that means that not every quarry is going to be able to provide that. But I don't think we can at this stage talk about where we're
Where
sourcing
it's
that.
coming from.
Once council has considered the contract, we can then put out some information about where we're sourcing the rock and why from then.
Yes, look, I apologise for asking a question that was not reasonable in this forum. One further question, and please, through you, Mayor and CEO, if it's possible that it's to be asked. The dredging of this facility, is it reasonable to ask a question around that and how that will proceed in the future, or is that a different topic?
I would imagine that the dredging does form a part of the existing contract, but happy to take advice from the CEO.
So the dredging, if I may, through you, Mayor, the dredging isn't part of this contract. So I might get Paul to just give a very brief update on that commitment we're making to try and make sure that the ramp is still usable for as long as possible during this project, and that we're looking at how we continue to make sure that the management of sand around the boat ramp is undertaken. And I think Paul can probably share some good news about some funding, external funding that we've got to help us with that as well. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. The dredging itself is a maintenance operation, which does sit generally under me when I've got my maintenance hat on. But we have just been awarded from Better Boating Victoria a dredging grant for $150,000, which will then enable us to bring in some more specialised machinery that's going to assist us to remove the sand from the boat ramp, which has been quite challenging in the last 6 to 12 months given the conditions we have. So yeah, that's going to be a bonus, and that window will give us some time to develop and bring to council a long-term strategy on how we're going to manage that moving into the future.
Thank you.
Very good. Councillor, is there any further questions of officers? Councillor White, please go ahead.
This is possibly similar to where Sonia started from, but in the report you've noted some specialist experts in the field, which we've obviously taken their advice. Because this is open ocean, extreme weather at times, I certainly wouldn't want to be blaming anyone down the track, but are we very confident, because we have had some poor advice before, well, not up to standard advice, it's turned around and cost council money, so we're pretty confident in these engineers, etc., that have provided this information and told us this is what we need to do.
I think, if I may, I'll just refer councillors back to Paul's original introduction that talked about the coastal engineers and then having it peer reviewed as well. So, without naming names, Paul or Renee, if you'd like to add to that.
Thank you, Councillor White. Yes, we've had a secondary peer review completed on the design just as extra precaution. And also during the construction phase, although we have complete confidence in the contractor we're putting forward, we're also getting the designer to come in and inspect at certain hold points just to ensure that obviously everything is okay with the implementation as per the design.
That's a really good outcome, actually, because it's not cheap. It's costing a lot of money, and we've got to get it right, because it's been a problem for some considerable time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillors, any further questions?
Mayor, I would move this motion, when you're ready.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Happy to see the motion moved. Seconded, Councillor Allen. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Well, I think I need to see the motion that I'm speaking to first, just procedurally, which I think...
Yes, indeed you do.
...is going to be...
5.2.1.2?
5.2.1.2, and councillors, I will move that council receives and notes this report and all attachments pertaining to this report, accept a tender submitted by Paul Falk Contracting Proprietary Limited for contract CON 2024-1611 Bastion Point Groyne Wall Remediation Works construction for the contract amount of $1,012,175 exclusive of GST. Authorises the CEO or delegate to finalise the terms and sign the contract in the form proposed, and resolves that the confidential attachments 1 and 2 to this report and all discussions relating to those attachments remain confidential. And that looks like what I would like to move.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. And Councillor Allen, that is what you are seconding? Yes, ma'am. Very good. Councillor Reeves, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, thank you. Councillors, since being constructed Bastion Point boat ramp, I recognise the sometimes diverse views, but it has provided a huge social and economic benefit to the local community and visitors. Socially, the boat ramp plays a pivotal role in the region's recreation life, serving as a hub for activities such as boating, surfing, life-saving, fishing and wildlife viewing. It defines and provides important user separation. In the Black Summer fires, as was noted in the report, it was a critical access point for evacuation and supplies when the community was isolated. And remember, councillors, that was the site of the largest Australian emergency evacuation since Cyclone Tracy in 1972. Economically, Bastion Point boat ramp is critical for Malakuta. It boosts the local business by increasing accommodation usage and capturing the spending in the areas that we know were boaters who previously travelled to launch their boats at Eden or the south coast of New South Wales. And of course, as is noted in the report, it supports the critical abalone fishing industry, which is a vital part of Malakuta's economy. And not having this vital infrastructure would catastrophically affect the industry. Councillors, I'm absolutely informed that beach launching is not an option anymore, and the entrance, while currently just open at high tide, is only just open, and Harrison's Channel is nearly impassable. If the abalone industry were pushed away from Malakuta, it would push divers to alternative access such as Conran or down to the southwest and put pressures on stocks in those areas and make them drive further afield. And also, councillors, as you know, the commercial offshore big game fishing industry has flourished in Malakuta since this boat ramp's opened, and has provided access to previously inaccessible fishing grounds off the southeast tip of the continent. We know across Australia that the presence of a well-maintained boat ramp also attracts further investment in local infrastructure and amenities, be it councillors in Malakuta or Exmouth, Narooma or Apollo Bay. And overall, Bastion Point boat ramp is now an integral part of Malakuta's economy and economic vitality and social fabric in enhancing the quality of life and driving economic growth forward through increased tourism and community utilisation. Our continued investment is really critical. To do nothing is not an option. I'm very satisfied with the process proposed and the peer reviews that are taking place in this. The spending proposed is a reasonable figure of the annual amortised expense over the last 10 years for the maintenance, and the benefit is a huge multiplier. Councillors, please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd just like to add to it what the importance to the abalone industry and the commercial fishing industry down there is. There's currently 23 licences operate out of Malakuta, and they employ 21 divers and 23 deckhands in a town of 800 or 900 people, which is quite substantial. The total allowable catch of abalone at the present time is 208 tonne, which is for the eastern zone, which is all ends up in Malakuta, principally all caught there. There's a little bit is landed at Cape Conran, but the rest of it all goes through Malakuta and all through Bastion Point. And on top of that, there is a developing sea urchin fishery, which has the green light from the Victorian Fisheries Authority to accelerate without quota, because they're actually a marine pest. So that I can't quantify just what that means to the Mallacoota economy, but it is fairly substantial and growing. So I've spoken to a couple of the operators there today and said what would happen unless we do something, and their response was, that's not even an option. This industry requires that access, and I think exactly the same would be said for the tourist industry. It's become a very substantial game fishery area out of Mallacoota, and as Trevor will tell you, those people spend a lot of money pursuing their sport, and so I think that this is a great investment in the economy of the Mallacoota community.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Uri, please go ahead.
I will support this motion. I just want to acknowledge that as a councillor on this council, when this boat ramp design was being developed with the community, it was a really difficult time for some people in the community because they really didn't want the design that was finally chosen. And I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of feeling in the community about the boat ramp, notwithstanding all the things, all the benefits we've heard that the boat ramp currently brings. My view now is that even though I didn't support it at the time, the boat ramp has been built. It's been built for a long time, and it is now a critical piece of infrastructure for the Mallacoota community, and we cannot allow it to fail. So I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Buckley.
Look, I know that this is a legacy issue that we're inheriting from a past decision that was controversial, and there's been, as a conservationist, I think that I was always very reflective of this project going ahead, that it would cause a lot of angst in the community and environmental damage to that coastline. And in fact, the design has failed, and we are now trying to fix the failed design that we've inherited. So, fiscal responsibility from my moral perspective is, are we throwing good money after bad? And I am concerned about this particular motion. I do acknowledge the sentiments of Councillor Allen and Reeves, and I understand the importance that this has to the community. So I just wanted to make those comments so that when I vote towards this motion, it will be people will to vote the way.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I believe Councillor Reeve, you have right of reply.
Oh, look, yes, I do, and I don't know that I'm arguing. I think there's relative agreement, but I'd just like to say, councillors, that, look, we all know that infrastructure requires maintenance, whether it's your house to be repainted, the roof repaired, the drains fixed, the tap washer. They don't last forever, and irrespective of whether it's public or private, they require maintenance. And, luckily I was around when we signed the contract for this, and I do recall that it was always envisaged that Bastion Point would require regular assessment and would probably require maintenance, just like any road, just like any bridge. I mean, we resheet roads every 10 years, they wear out. And here we have an ocean access boat ramp that is subject to really difficult conditions. And what I do know is that what's proposed, and I really thank the officers for the work they've done, and my research and the information I have gleaned is that the repairs will bring this into line with other similar ocean access seawalls and groins, such as Apollo Bay, Bermagui and Narooma, for example, in terms of the rock size. And that's really important. It's as we've spoken about, Bastion Point's an essential and integral part of the visitor economy. And yet, you're right, Mendy, there was that tension at the time, And I think there are still people who lament what's happened, but overall it is part of that infrastructure and the fabric of Mallacoota now, and the continued investment is an obligation. As I said, just as continued maintenance and improvement in our roads and airports, building and bridges, it's a contemporary expectation of our community to look after our assets, and that's about seamless connectivity for our community. So thanks for the words that have been said, councillors, and I look forward to being put to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves, and I will now put it to the vote. Councillors, all those in favour? And those opposed? And just for the record, Councillor Buckley, can I just confirm that you've abstained in that vote?
Correct, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, councillors. That motion is passed. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.2.2, which is Con 2024-1652, provision of waste and recycling trailer services, which falls under the Directorate of Assets and Environment, Mr. Paul Rooney, and we also have, I note, Nathan Maserka with us as well. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report titled Contract 2024-1652, Provision of Waste and Recycling Trailer Services, which is seeking Council award the services based on office recommendations. East Gippsland Shire Council provides community access to 13 waste trailers positioned in remote locations throughout the municipality. The key points for Council to consider are: the contract is for hauling, monitoring and providing emptying services for these waste and recycled trailers. This contract will replace Contract 2020-19-1370, Provision of Waste and Recycling Services, which expired June 2024. A request for tender was advertised with a closing date of May 8th, and 6 conforming submissions were received. A tender evaluation panel reviewed the submissions and a TE report is provided, Attachment 1. The contract is for 2 years with the possibility of a 2-year extension inclusive of CPI adjustment. The recommendation contractor has a competitive pricing and significant experience. Also present tonight is Nathan Maserka, who is available to respond to questions of a technical nature. This report is presented for your consideration. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Rooney. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Buckley, please go ahead.
Yeah, look, thanks very much. My question is it's really just a question of how successful this process has been. You know, when we first in remote and rural areas saw these big bins come in and our tips change, and you know, often we thought about how much it costs to remove the waste and take it all the way down to a different facility, and you know, the amount of money and fuel, etc., when we were just doing it locally. So I think it's a really good opportunity to talk to the positives of what the waste and recycling trailer services do for our community, and how you know, has it become a success story.
Thank you, Councillor. I might refer that question to Nathan.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question, and through you, Mayor. Unfortunately, you know, with my short time with East Gippsland Shire Council, I wasn't involved with those earlier service, but I have seen the reports, and I know Council went through a process over the previous decade to essentially close down, I think it was some 11 landfills that where we essentially had in a lot of those sites as well, trenching and burning, you know, and not access to recycling. So I do know that since the trailer service has come on, we've certainly provided access to recycling services, and that wasn't always the case in some of these remote communities. And in fact, the waste disposal options available were contaminating those environments they were in, and that's certainly been turned around. In terms of the financial efficiencies or gains that have been achieved from those previous practices, if that goes to the point of the question, I would have to actually take that on notice and actually do some further work. Again, from the reports that I've read since joining East Gippsland Council, increasing recycling and reducing environmental risk has certainly been a result of the new trailer service for those communities. Thanks.
Just one final question. In the past, there was some access issues in regards to being able to use the facility, especially for elderly people. And perhaps this is another question or notice, but I'd like to know how that has transpired and if those sort of accessibility issues to the skip bins, etc., has been dealt with. So it was an issue a while ago, so I'd just like to raise it again and perhaps get some information back on that. So thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley.
We might need to take that one on notice around the access to the bins. I know that was an issue for up in Benambra and experienced in Bruthen as well. I might just ask a question, if that's okay, councillors, of Nathan. I was in Galantepe over the weekend and there was a giant blue steel, what appeared to be bin of sorts on the side of the Galantepe road there. In my experience, our recycling and waste trailers have been those yellow single axle trailers. Is most of this contract in relation to those single axle trailers, or are we also moving to those larger bins that we might see at transfer stations as well as like the one I saw in Galantepe?
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. I'm happy to talk to that one. So firstly, I'll answer the second part of the question. This refers to the rural waste trailers and not the split bin skips that you saw in Galantepe. It's a really good question to ask, though, in terms of why you saw that bin in Galantepe. The team have recently relocated it to a site that had a little bit more passive surveillance. Just in the last 2 months, we've had significant dumping that had built up over time. So we had to move the bin from its previous location. It was located on a private parcel of land. We've removed all of the illegally dumped waste and shifted the bin as a trial site. And so far we haven't seen that illegal dumping repeat in that location. So all accounts, it's been a positive shift, but it is something we're trialling. Relative to the rural waste trailer services that we provide, we're also looking to trial a trailer at the Bush Nursing Centre in Galantepe as well and see the take-up and whether we actually need the larger bin or whether a smaller trailer service would suffice. So that's an option that we may roll into this contract in future. But firstly, the bin has recently appeared on the road there just out of Galantepe as a result of a clean-up from the previous site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor, is there any further questions of officers? We do have an officer recommendation. Councillor Buckley, I think you got there first. Seconded Councillor Greason. Councillor Buckley, would you like to fill the blanks there?
Are they being brought up? Yes, populated. Okay. Can I be directed where that information is on my briefing pack, please?
Page 191.
191, I believe, is the page number.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm a little bit behind. 191.
That is correct.
Okay. There I am. The council receives and notes this report and all attachments pertaining to this report, accepts the tender submitted by Tambo Waste. Am I correct, Mayor?
It is Proprietary Limited.
Yes, yeah, for Con 2024-165, provision of waste and recycling trailer services for a period of 2 years with one extension option of up to 2 years for the lump sum price of $93,600 ex-GST at schedule rates, Area 2 lump sum price of $100,000 excluding GST and schedule of rates, Area 3 lump sum price of $60,840 and schedule rates of Area X GST. And Area 4 schedule rates Monday to Friday per collection disposal prices. 3 authorises the, as provided as confidential attachment 1 be accepted. And then point 3 authorises the Chief Executive Officer or delegate to exercise the 1 2-year extension option on the basis that contractual terms have been met. Point 4 authorises the Chief Executive Officer or delegate to finalise the terms and to sign and seal the contract in the form proposed. And point 5 resolves the confidential attachment 1 to this report and all discussions remain confidential.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Greason, are you happy to second those details?
Yes, I am, thank you.
Very good. Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would. Look, this is really interesting because when we first got these skip bins into my area and into remote areas, it was kind of, the locals were aghast and there was a lot of pushback. But however, since the organisation has been able to implement the process with, success and also with understanding, I think people have embraced it, and I think that we've tried to deal with issues as they've arisen. I would like to see some of the tip fees go down, but I think the problem is that we're faced with state imposts and regulations that are pushing us to have to address that fiscal responsibility, which makes it local councils. And I think that's going to be a discussion into the future for the future council group that is going to sort of and understanding of how hard it is the more remote you are and the more expensive it is to relocate your rubbish. So enough said with that. I just this is something that we have to do, so I put the motion to the vote and hope that councillors will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. You did break up a little bit there, but I think we generally understand what you were saying, so thanks for that. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I
Happy
don't,
not to?
thank you.
Okay, in which case, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No? Very good. In that case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Fantastic, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. And that moves us now to agenda item 5.3.1, which is Information Communications Technology Equipment Tender Panel of Suppliers, joint tender with the Shire of Wellington, and this sits within the Business Excellence Directorate. Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, as the Mayor has just announced, that is the paper that is before you, and it is seeking approval to issue contracts to the preferred tenderers provided in confidential attachment 1 for an ICT panel of suppliers. So, key points. Councils obviously have significant costs to ensure ongoing requirements in relation to ICT equipment. Regional councils can achieve economies of scale through collaboration and sharing services to be more efficient. That's why collaborative procurement was undertaken with Wellington Shire Council to achieve the most cost-effective and efficient result in the procurement of ICT equipment. It means the community continues to get the benefits of shared services and collaborative procurement between the two councils. Both councils undertook their normal public tender advertising process, so registered businesses will have received a notification via the council website, Tenderlink or the local newspaper. In addition, the council officers contacted the known local businesses to advise of the tender being out in the market, and local businesses who had also registered with us for an interest in doing business with council. That ensures that the joint tender, and that is before you, provided the opportunity to establish a procurement panel of local equipment suppliers supporting the local economy. Without the panel contract, we may be exposed to higher rates of service for ICT equipment and will be susceptible to fluctuating hardware markets, meaning more risk of higher costs and delays in getting the right equipment. You can also see in the report that from a cost avoidance perspective, we're suggesting that this is an $80,000 saving across the course of the 3-year panel that is being recommended. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors are all very used to, in the process of tender evaluation, to look at local benefit, and you mentioned that in your introduction. I'm wondering, with the joint tender with Wellington Shire, how is that managed? Does local mean across both shires?
Thank you, Councillor. It's a really good question, and yes, it does mean across both shires. So, as I was saying as part of the introduction to the report as well, from a Wellington Shire Council perspective and an East Gippsland Shire Council perspective, we reached out to local providers who'd expressed an interest. We went through our normal tendering processes and then assessed them from a locality perspective with the 5% that we attribute to that as part of that evaluation process. and it hasn't. I think that you can see as part of the confidential attachment, and I won't go into too much detail because it is confidential, but there is local providers that are put into that and recommended.
Further questions of officers, councillors on this matter? No, there is a recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover? Councillor Buckley, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Stowe, is that a hand? Councillor Reeves, is that a hand? And a seconder?
No, I'm happy to second it.
Councillor Reeves, thank you.
We're all just avoiding having to read it out, that's all.
Excellent. Okay. Councillor Buckley, that is your privilege.
Sonia.
Oh, sucker for punishment. Can I please be guided to the pack? Which page am I on?
You are on
For the
208.
222.
Hello.
222, I believe. Sorry, 212.
212. Okay.
You can probably just read out the names because all the other details are there for everybody else to see.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. The council receives and notes this.
Sorry, Councillor Buckley, I'm going to have to ask you to start again because you were breaking up quite severely there.
Sorry about the poor connectivity. That council receives and notes this report and all attachments pertaining to this report, approves Wellington Shire Council to award contract number 2024-000077 for the Information Communications Technology Equipment Panel of Suppliers on behalf of East Gippsland Shire Council for a 3-year period to the following. Attainable, am I doing this right? The companies in this box of 212?
If I might, we might get some direction. I believe, Councillor Buckley, you're just reading out the conforming.
You are, Councillor Buckley, so through you, Mayor. So it's on page 214 at the top. And I do apologise, it looks a little bit different because this is a joint procurement, so it's under the banner of the Wellington Shire Council tender evaluation page, which is just a little bit different to ours.
My apologies there, Councillor Buckley. I directed you to the wrong page, so it's actually 214 that you need to be on.
Yep, thank you. That makes more sense. So the recommendation is...
Sorry, Councillor Buckley, you're cutting in and out quite a lot.
Mayor, can I get some governance advice on whether I could second the motion and Councillor Reeves...
Sonia, how about I just read it for you and you nod furiously?
Thank you.
I'm happy to do that.
Happy to do that.
So I think we're to the following, which is Bamet's Proprietary Limited, Communication Design Management Proprietary Limited, Dell Australia, Learning with Technologies, Office Choice Bairnsdale Proprietary Limited, Perfect Proprietary Limited, Solution 1, Wave 1 Proprietary Limited, and that's point 3, that approves and authorises the CEO to delegate and execute such documents as necessary to give effect to the arrangements of the Information Communication Technology Equipment Panel of Suppliers Contract 2024-000077, and number 4, resolves that confidential attachment 1 to this report and all discussions relating to the attachment remain confidential. And I was trying to avoid having to read all that out, but I did anyway, so that's fine. We collaborated and it's done.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. And Councillor Buckley, if you can just confirm that those details are correct.
The frost is frozen.
That. Hello.
And welcome back with us, Councillor Buckley. If you could just please confirm that those details are correct.
Yes, they are correct, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And would either of the mover or seconder like to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, that anything that saves our organisation $80,000 is a good bet, and Wellington Shire, they are wonderful neighbours to our region, and I fully support our process of engagement, working hand in hand with them. And I'd like to also thank the officers and Phil for all the hard work that they do for our organisation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Reeves? No? Very good. Would anybody else like to speak to the motion? Is the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to agenda item 5.3.2. Is that right? ICT printer copier tender, panel of suppliers, joint tender with Wellington Shire Council. Very good. Thank you, Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, the Mayor has announced the title of the report, and again, it's seeking the approval to issue contracts to the preferred tenderers, provided a confidential attachment 1 for printer and copier services, such as the supply of print and copier consumables, maintenance and repair of equipment and supply. So this has gone through exactly the same process as the previous one went through. So I won't go through all of the dot points again, but to say that this one is looking at a $60,000 cost avoidance across the life of the panel, and all of the invites for local have been considered as part of the recommended group of contractors in the confidential attachment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Any questions, councillors? There is a recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Uri. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Van Diggle. Councillor Uri, would you like to fill in the blanks, please?
Certainly.
We'll just see if we can get those up on the screen. Thank you, Vanessa.
Yep. So the motion that Council approves Wellington Shire Council to award contract number 2024-000023 for the print and copier services panel of providers on behalf of East Gippsland Shire Council for a 3-year period to the following: GB Machines Proprietary Limited, KISS Print Solutions Proprietary Limited, Lightstorm Imaging Proprietary Limited, ThinkX Holdings Proprietary Limited, Biotech South East Victoria Proprietary Limited. And as shown on the screen for points 2, 3 and 4. I don't think I need to read them, do I?
No, I don't think so. I think they're all there for people to see. Councillor Van Diggle, can you just confirm that those details are correct and meet your understanding?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, just to thank the officers for the work behind this. I think it's a straightforward contract. I'm happy to recommend the motion to councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillor Van Diggle? Nothing to add? Very good. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In that case, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Agenda item 5.3.3 is the council meeting resolution register, which is also with you, I believe, Ms Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So before you is the report titled the Council Meeting Resolution Register, which is seeking your noting of the resolution registers provided at attachments 1, 2, 3. So key points of the report. Obviously, reporting council resolutions is a vital measure of council's performance and provides the information it needs to demonstrate transparency and accountability to the community. The council's chief executive officer is responsible for ensuring that decisions of the council are implemented without undue delay. For the period 1 April to 30 June 2024, there were 21 open council resolutions, not including resolutions for noting only, in the reporting period, of which all have been completed. 3 closed council resolutions, not including resolutions for noting only, of which 2 are complete and 1 is in progress. The report also provides an update on any outstanding actions from the previous report tabled on the 30th of April. This update is provided in attachment 1. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to this agenda item? Councillor Buckley, please go ahead.
Yeah, look, thank you very much. I'm just wanting to get some information about the two resolutions that are in progress. The first one is Sealed Roads Major Rehabilitation Capital Works on page 234 of our agenda. And the second one is the heritage-listed Hinnamungi Timber Trust Bridge. So my first question is in regards to the Sealed Roads Major Rehabilitation Capital Works program. Can we just have a very brief overview of what that means for our region and how we're tracking on our sealed roads and what type of funding is going towards that project?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Great question. And through you, Mayor, I might pass that over to the Acting General Manager of Assets and Environment, please.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. It's probably a question you'll need to take on notice if you're looking for specifics in terms of projects and what's been planned for this year. There will be a sealing program which will be portioned out to areas throughout the municipality on a needs basis, but in terms of specifics, I would have to take that on notice and get back to you. I'd be able to get back to you with a spreadsheet which would show our intentions for this financial year.
Fabulous. And the funding, is this Roads to Recovery money, or where is the funding being sourced from?
For this, it'll be sourced from some grant funding, but it'll also be council money as well.
Thank you. And my second question was in regards to the heritage-listed Hinnamungi Trust Bridge. Can you please explain to me why there is why the Trust Bridge looks like it will be a thing of the past, history itself, and what the process will be in regards to the future?
Thanks again, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. At present, so there has been some structural investigation done on the bridge, the existing structure, and it has shown to be unsound at the moment. So intention was that we've gone back to Heritage Victoria. We've made them aware of that, and we're waiting for a response from them, which we haven't got at this point in time. So our intention is to make the bridge safe, which is where it has to be at the moment, and then beyond that we haven't made a final decision on the outcome of the bridge, but that will be dictated upon once we get a response back from Heritage Victoria. That'll guide us on where we're going with this.
Thank you very much for that response. Appreciate it.
Councillors, further questions? Councillor White, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is regarding the Hinnamungi Bridge, Paul. It's just looking at the date, 28th of February, it's about 19 months ago that this process began, and I'm a bit intrigued. Possibly you answered it maybe by getting no response from Heritage Victoria, because it's a very long time for any project to be sitting in progress.
Through you, Mayor, given that Paul is acting and given that I was a general manager when this came to councillors, perhaps I can explain. At the time, we had assumed that there was more funding coming to council from Heritage Victoria, and we also assumed that we were undertaking work that would allow us to break the project into stages. As Paul has said, we've done a lot of assessment work and looking at how we could stage the repairs, and what we've come to the conclusion is that can't stage it, and we're talking about therefore having to do over $2 million of works, which would really completely rebuild the bridge. So that's where we're in negotiations with Heritage Victoria at the moment, about given the fact that we can't stage the repairs and given the financial burden that places on council for a bridge that was transferred to council by the then Roads Authority and was placed on the Heritage Register without perhaps considering how it would continue to be maintained. It's an unreasonable burden to place on our ratepayers, and therefore we're working with Heritage Victoria to work out how we can celebrate the heritage that was there, recognise it, work with the community to certainly acknowledge the heritage of the bridge as it was built, because it looks very different to the bridge that was there when it was originally built. And also recognise that there is a bridge just down the road that is now used as a traffic bridge and can be used as a pedestrian bridge. So while we work through all of that, if I went back to the resolution directed officers to continue to negotiate with the Heritage Victoria before letting any contracts, and that is what we've been doing, hence why we haven't let the contract. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Weigel. Councillor Buckley, I see you have another question there. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is pertaining to 5.2.1, submission inquiry into local government of sustainability. It's a comment, but also a question. And my comment is that I thought that this was an excellent report, and the manager and officers responsible should be commended for it. And I'm just wondering, when will we find out or have a response in regards to the submission process?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Great question, and through you, Mayor. So at the moment they're conducting hearings for both, the state one and the federal one, and so the plan would be to partake in the hearings that are relevant locally to us, and I do believe that there's one coming up in September in Traralgon for the state one, and to listen in and wait for when the hearings are coming more locally for the federal one. But the answer being, we will come back to you with the key themes as we know them and find them out based on when the hearing is being heard at different places.
Look, thanks very much. A really, really important process, that we need to get some traction in. So I wish you every success and look forward to being part of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillors, any further questions of officers on this matter? There is a motion and recommendation in the report. Do I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Uri, seconded by Councillor Buckley. Just beat you out then, Arthur. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just to thank the officers. This is obviously a critical piece of information, and it allows councillors to keep track of the resolutions and look up and see where the process is, obviously, and also for the members of the community to see where the motions are up to. So thank you very much for keeping this up to date and for the prompt actions on the motions.
Thanks, Councillor Uri. And Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak to the motion? Very good. Is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Agenda item 5.3.4, S11A, which is the Instrument of Appointment and Authorisation, Planning Environment Act 1987. Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, council officers are appointed as authorised officers to exercise statutory powers under various acts, regulations and local laws. In most cases, authorised officers are able to be appointed by the Chief Executive Officer through the power of delegation. However, due to a quirk of the Planning Environment Act, specifically requires that authorised officers in this particular act are appointed by a resolution of council. We have a new statutory planning officer, Petra Wood, which is very exciting for us. So we need to, via council resolution, recommend the new appointment of her as an authorised officer. So through you, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Ms Johnson. Council, are there any questions on that matter? Fairly procedural. There is, thank you, Councillor Reeves, to move, and a second to Councillor Allen. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Reeves?
Look, we're very pleased to welcome Petra Wood and hope that they have a long and distinguished career with us and makes a great contribution to the planning department.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Allen? No, very good. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Councillor Buckley, would you like to speak for the motion? Please go ahead.
Look, thanks very much. I think this is a great step forward in ensuring that our planning department is getting its work done, and I know that it's hard to come by employees that are working in this space, and I just want to to inform councillors that after my visit to Rural Council's Victoria Forum this week, that there is a new AI process that will be assisting planning departments into the future called it's called My Lot. So that's just a little bit of information that shows that we're going into a brand new space when it comes into planning, and I look forward to sharing that information with councillors and the organisation into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? No, in which case I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Now, councillors, we now need to consider some confidential matters. Agenda items 7.1, agenda item 7.1 in particular. So I will just need a motion that we close the meeting to the public in accordance with the provisions of Section 66(2) of the Local Government Act to consider those items. Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Seconded, Councillor Greason. Councillors, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Stowe, Councillor Greason, no. Is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak to it? No. All those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you, councillors. So we'll now move into To the final agenda item for this evening, and our audience online is back with us. We're back on YouTube. Welcome back, everybody. Agenda item number 8 is meeting close, which I'll do by simply saying thank you to councillors and staff for the reports that you've presented and your participation this evening. That concludes the proceedings for tonight's meeting. Thank you, everybody watching online and attending the public gallery. I'll now declare the meeting closed, time being 8:22 p.m. Have a safe evening and good night.